Speak on this show 2021, episode 9. It's a straight talk, no chaser Saturday. Let's go. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Speak On It. I'm your boy, R.W. Coolins. It's a straight talk, no chaser Saturday morning, early Saturday morning. First and foremost, giving honor to God who allows me to come to you in this manner on a weekly basis. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Maurice Wigfall. Appreciate you, bro. Curious about the topic today? It's just going to be a straight talk, no chaser, bro. We got some things we're going to touch on. I'm glad you brought that up, though. I'm glad you brought it up because today I'm trying to wean us away from the politics. We're going to touch on some things political, but not everything engrossed in the politics of what's going on like we did, over the last year. I'm trying to get away from that. So we're going to touch on some things. Some things will be interjected with some politics because that's what's driving us nowadays, but we're not going to be based everything on politics. So we're going to get into that as we go into the show. rwcoolins.com is the website. You can go there and get all the information you want, all the information you need. All the links are there. YouTube, Facebook, Spreaker.com, all that. Spreaker.com, you can go there and listen to the audio after the show. You can also download off of Apple iTunes for the audio. We're broadcasting live on YouTube and Facebook under RW Coolins. Go there. Chime in. If you want to make a comment during the show, you can also put your comment in. We'll put it up on the board. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Call in number 844-904-2665. That's 844-904-2665. No matter what the situation is, let your voice be heard. Say what you mean, but mean what you say. We come in as friends. We leave as friends. We may not always agree, but we can agree to disagree. And that's what this show is all about, to put the information out there. You may not agree, but the biggest thing about it is let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it. DCAM, appreciate the support, my brother. Appreciate the support. So that's where we're at now. That's where we're at with the show today. We did the Black History Month thing. We're going to get into Black History Month as we go along. But today I wanted to change it up a little bit. I want to change it up a little bit today in the aspect of talking about some things that are going on, some words we hear on a normal basis now that I want to bring up some things and see where we land with this. And I'll appreciate everybody's input as we go along with the show today, but we're going to get into it and then take it from there. So it's like I said, it's a straight talk, no chaser Saturday morning. Good morning, Lorraine Martinez. Appreciate the support. Lolo, appreciate the support. So let's get into this. Straight talk, no chaser. Straight talk, no chaser. This is when you take your shot to the head. No ice, no mixer, nothing. That shot of tequila y'all drink, tequila as I like to call it, that y'all like to drink, that I stay away from, that kind of stuff. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, sis. Appreciate the support. I'm laughing at myself at the same time I'm trying to say this. But you know how you take that shot to the head and everything like you used to do back when long time ago when you was a young person. Things we don't do as we progress in life, sometimes every once in a while. But when we talk about straight talk, no chaser, this is just straight. I mean, these are the things that are going on that I see that I think we just need to be straight up about and talk about. I'm going to start off with the word optics. Let's start off with the word optics, because we've been hearing the word optics a lot lately while they're doing these, kind of investigation on the Hill, trying to figure out what happened on the insurrection and all that kind of stuff. Good morning, Lady Michelle. Good morning. Appreciate the support. With the insurrection, we keep hearing optics. So let me get into this real quick. Optics. The definition of optics is the scientific study of sight and the behavior of light, or the properties of transmission and deflection of other forms of radiation. Now that's one. The second one is, which pertains to what we're going to talk about, the way in which an event or course of action is perceived by the public. Optics, the way in which an event or course of action is perceived by the public. Now, I watched a little bit of these hearings on the Capitol about the insurrection. They had the FBI director, they had the National Guard person, the Sergeant at Arms. This has been going on for a little while now. And what I keep hearing is optics. The optics of what they didn't want society to see as a whole. When they talk about the insurrection on the Capitol, one of the big things they're saying is the National Guard was not sent or was not given to support the Capitol Police in a timely enough time, because the main conversation wasn't whether they should send them, whether it would be good for them. It was the optics, what people would see by the National Guard being deployed to the Capitol to help with the insurrection. But let's go back. Let's go back to when sometime this summer, and I can't remember the exact date because this is a straight talk, no chase. I'm trying to we're just going off the top today, top of the dome. But back this summer, when the protests with the George Floyd was going on, all the protests were going on. And we had a protest in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., they were outside of this, it was an older church, national church. And because the president of the United States at the time, President Trump, wanted to do a photo op in front of the church to show that he was in control and in power and things like that. First, when they were having these protests, they put him in the bunker in the White House. Then he decided he wanted to come out the bunker and come out and stand in front of the church, hold the Bible upside down. Everybody remembers the optics, but they were not concerned about the optics of the National Guard or the people they deployed out there to disperse the protesters for the Black Lives Matter movement in DC at that day. They did not worry about the optics at that time during that day. Why? But they're worried about the optics on the Capitol when they had many more people. And what they were trying to do was overthrow the election that had already been decided. But they were worried about the optics of having the military, the National Guard, there to support that. So my question would be, was it the optics or was it who was doing the protest? And you've heard me say this before, but the optics at what they didn't do at the Capitol, they used every bit of what they had in their arsenal to disperse the protesters down in DC by that church for the president to come out and take a photo op. Now, if they were so concerned about safety and things like this at that time, there was more of a threat to the president during the insurrection when he did this speech on the Capitol than there was a threat for him when he went out there to do the visuals, the optics, the pictures in front of the church. So are we really talking about optics? Good morning, Michelle Long. Good morning. Appreciate the support. So are we really talking about optics, or are we talking about the way we handle different things depending on who's doing the things? Is it a black and white issue, or is it a Black Lives Matter issue and an insurrection issue? Which way do we go with this? Because we kept hearing, and this is what jumped out at me, the word optics of how it would seem or how it would be seen if they responded this way to this, but they didn't respond this way to that. Which way is it? Because you keep hearing them throw optics out there like that was the main decision in why they didn't send the National Guard in a timely enough time. And they said that they put 3 requests in that day to get the National Guard out there. It took them 3 hours before they finally seen the first guardsman. Optics? I'll let you be the judge of that. Is it optics? Now that I've seen also that, the one that was at the Capitol, that was out there with no shirt on with the fur, little fur, I don't know, I call it the onesie, the fur coat on. He was shamanism or whatever he was. He was there. Now he went up to trial the other day, and I guess he was talking to a reporter or something like that. And he is saying that he went in with the intent to pray while he was in the Capitol, in the chambers. He didn't go in there to destroy anything. He didn't go in there. He went in there to pray in his, whatever that religion is that he practices, for the Capitol, within the Capitol. This is his excuse now. First, he said that Trump told them to come. Now he's saying that he went in there just to pray. He had no ill will, no ill intent, and he was telling people not to do this and not to do that while he was in there. But the overall reaching thing about this is he was in the Capitol on that day. No matter what his intentions were, he was there that day. There was another person that was arrested, you know, the one that had his feet up on the desk in Nancy Pelosi's office. And I know we're getting into a little bit of politics. This is not really politics. This is just criminals. Let's just be real. But the one that had his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk, taking pictures and different things like that, he came in front of a judge. The judge sent him back to jail. He hasn't been released. He's still in jail until his trial comes up. Now he's pissed because he said he didn't do anything that bad where he should still be behind bars. Other people have been being released. Why can't I be released? Well, you're considered a criminal. And what you did is what you did. So the judge said, you're going to stay behind bars. He had outburst in court. He's still in jail. The optics of what happened at the insurrection compared to what happened with the BLM. The people that were arrested for the Capitol insurrection, who are still serving time, and those who were released, able to go to Cancun or Mexico or wherever they were going, vacation, family vacations, things like that. Even though they stormed the Capitol, I'm still waiting to see how all this is going to turn out. And I say that because it's not what you did, it's who did it in most cases. So I'm just waiting. I'm watching. And I would hope you guys are paying attention to this too, because it leads into the voting. What's going to happen with the voting? Right now, there are many states that are changing the way you vote, all because of the way the last vote turned out. And the problem with this is we've had the John Lewis Voting Rights Act sitting in the Senate for almost a year now, if not longer. I think it just changed the name. The Voting Rights Act was there when John Lewis passed. They put his name on it. But the John Lewis Voting Rights Act has been sitting in the Senate chambers for a long period of time. And now you have most of the states at the legislation levels are run by Republicans. And what the Republicans are doing at these legislatures, at these state levels, is they're changing the rules on how you vote, what's going to be open. They're changing polling times. They're changing drop-off locations. They're putting in these laws, per se, about voting to make it harder for you to vote in the next elections coming up. Things as much as just not having polls open on Sundays in Georgia. Georgia is one affected by this because if they're not having the polls open on Sundays, one of the big things that they had in the last election was souls to the polls. By doing this and closing down election locations on Sundays, you won't have souls to the polls, which by numbers, you had a large voter turnout because they left from the churches and went straight to the polls. But you're not going to be able to do that because now they're closing down polling stations on Sundays. So they're looking for these little small things to change. Mail-in voting, you have to have an excuse in order to do mail-in voting, not to the level that we did it because of the pandemic this last year, but they want to change it to the point that you have to have a legitimate excuse to do mail-in voting or absentee voting in the next election. These are things that are going on right now, leading up to the next election. And it all gears around the fact that you had these people out here saying that this last election was stolen, that people were allowed to vote who were not registered. People were voting twice, 3 times. All the things you can think that they've been talking about all this time is precursors to what they're doing now to minimize the options that you have in order to go to the polls and put your vote in. When you really sit and think about this, the only time we get into or we have a problem with how we vote or what's going on with the voting or the lines being changed, where they call it gerrymandering, where they change district lines and things like this so a state can get more representatives in Congress and the Senate. The only time we have these problems is when Republicans are involved in this. And they do everything in their power while they're in a certain position of power to change the rules, change the ways, change how things are done in order for your voice to be heard at the polls. But we, as American citizens, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we continue to vote these same people in who do not have our best interest at hand. And then when things turn out like this, where they're changing these rules along the way because of what happened in the last election, so it doesn't happen in the next election, we get mad, but we don't do what we need to do, and that's to get them out of there. Because we're not all on the same accord when it comes to what we think is in our best interest by the people that we put there. It's going to be hard to continue doing what we did the last election to get people out when you start throwing up these type of roadblocks. Also, now this one jumped out at me. In Georgia, if you're standing in line to vote at a polling station, you cannot have food or drinks in line. You cannot have people bringing you food because you're out there for a long period of time. You cannot have food while you're in line. All these things are being written into voting rules and regulations right now for the election in 2022 and the next one in 2024. And these are the people that we put in these positions to look out for our best interests. I laugh because we see these things coming. We see the setup for these things. But because it's not directly affecting us at the time, we pay no attention to it. But then when it starts to affect us, when it's right here in our face, now we want to do something. We are too reactive rather than proactive. Let me say that one more time. We're too reactive rather than proactive when it comes to these type things. When you're going to disenfranchise a group, a block of so-called voters because you didn't get your way the last time because they showed out and showed up, and you go in to change these things so you don't have that same number of folks to show up, what does that say about our systems as we talk about all the time? You can't change a system that was not put in place for you. It was put in place against you. And we continue to let these people change the rules and the way we do things consistently when it comes to this. But let's transition. Let me give you all these titles real quick and tell me if you recognize them. And to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street, if I ran the zoo, McElligot's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Eggs Super, The Cat's Quizzer. Now I've looked at these 6 titles, and I've looked at them over and over and over again. If anybody doesn't know, these are 6 titles of books that Dr. Seuss wrote. And I don't recognize any of the 6 from my childhood and even up to today. I don't recognize any of the 6 of these books, which most of you probably don't either. But these are the 6 books that Dr. Seuss's family decided to pull, and I'm going to get into the exact verbiage they used, but they decided to pull and will not publish anymore because they portray people in ways that are hurtful and wrong in the business that preserves their author's legacy. 6 titles that I just read. And to think I saw it on Mulberry Street, If I Ran the Zoo, McElligot's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, The Cat's Quizzer. How many of y'all recognize these titles? Any of those 6 titles? Because when you say Dr. Seuss, you think of Whoville from The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. You think of The Cat in the Hat. That's the one that everybody really thinks about. And then you got those other ones, and I don't know all of them because, there's only certain ones like The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, Cat in the Hat. Those are the main 2 that I know and remember. But these 6, I don't know. I don't remember them. I don't recall them. But here's the thing. They came out with this this week where they said that they were going to stop publishing these 6 books. These 6 books. Lorraine Martinez, none. Exactly. Nobody remembers them. Thank you. Nobody remembers these 6 titles. Nobody's ever heard of them. But the ones that have heard of them or have never heard of them, now that they see the 6 titles, they're in an uproar. They're in an uproar. So let me read exactly what the press release said about Dr. Seuss's books. It says Dr. Seuss books are pulled and a cancel culture, and we're going to get into that a little later, a cancel culture controversy erupts. The beloved author's most famous books like Green Eggs and Ham, oh, I forgot about that one, Green Eggs and Ham too, okay, were untouched, but his estate's decision nevertheless prompted a backlash and raised questions about what should be preserved as part of the cultural record. Now, name you 6 titles that nobody recognizes, including me. But this is what it goes into. Classic children's books are perennial bestsellers and an important revenue stream for publishers. Last year, more than 338,000 copies of Green Eggs and Ham were sold across the United States, according to the NPD BookScan, which tracks the sale of physical books at most retailers. One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish sold more than 311,000 copies. And Oh, the Places You'll Go, which is always popular as a high school graduation gift, sold more than 513,000 copies. Now, here's where it gets interesting with those 6 titles. And to think I saw it on Mulberry Street, one of the 6 books pulled by the estate sold about 5,000 copies last year, according to the BookScan. McElligot's Pool and the Cat's Quizzer haven't sold any books in years through the retailers that BookScan tracks. So 2 of the titles that I mentioned that they're pulling off the shelves, 2 of those titles have not sold any books in years, according to BookScan, tracking. Putting the merits of the books aside, removing Green Eggs and Hams will be completely different, the business proposition, from doing away with new printings of McElligot's Pool. Dr. Seuss is perhaps the most beloved children's book author to come under criticism for outdated and insensitive depictions of racial, ethnic, cultural, and gender differences. And then it gets into it. It says some authors self-edited their work in response to criticism in the 1970s. Now watch this now. Ronald Dahl revised Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which originally depicted the factory workers as dark-skinned pygmies from Africa. After facing charges of racism from the NAACP, Mr. Dahl made the workers Oompa Loompas from a fictional country called Loompaland. The revision failed to appease those who contend that the Oompa Loompas were essentially indentured servants and other critics of some of Dahl's works like The Witches, which many regard as anti-Semitic, have endured. So what they're doing is they're giving you a breakdown of Dr. Seuss's books, the ones that aren't selling, the ones that haven't sold any copies in a long period of time, and they're comparing it to other authors who have gone back and revised their writings. Now, how many people actually knew that the Oompa Loompas originally started out as African pygmies? I didn't. I'm still a little shocked about the Oompa Loompas from, what is it, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Which one? Where's you have one of these? But there's one, they're looking at the stereotypes of what these characters portray. And they said they were subservient. Dark-skinned pygmies from Africa is what they started out at. Then they changed the Oompa Loompas, which other people had a problem with. Because if you remember, the Oompa Loompas were little people. They had them, little people. And they were subservient to the bigger people in the movie. But they went back and they revised it. They didn't revise it perfectly, but they did take the time to revise it. And that's all I think anyone's asking about when they talk about these 6 books. And it says, many were stunned by the Seuss estate's decision, however, which was announced on Tuesday to coincide with Dr. Seuss's birthday. I think he was 117 years old. In a statement, Dr. Seuss Enterprises said it decided to discontinue those 6 titles last year after consulting a panel of experts, including educators, to review its catalog. So this is not something they just woke up yesterday and said, we're going to get these books gone. This is not something that Dr. Seuss's estate came back and said, we're getting a lot of complaints about this because, as I mentioned, these 6 titles, a lot of people don't even know. But they had researchers come in, look at these 6 books, or look at the plethora of books that he's written. And these are 6 books that have negative connotations, racial, discriminatory things. Like they have one in there where I think it mentioned that it was a Chinese guy and he had slanted eyes, carrying a rice bowl, things like that. They decided that these are not good for us to continue publishing. But because of this, everyone that wanted to jump on the bandwagon looked at where this cancel culture, as they say, was out to get rid of Dr. Seuss, which shows that people do not go and do their research before they jump. It shows that people listen to other talking heads. I'm a talking head, but other talking heads who don't give you the true understanding of what's going on. When they said Dr. Seuss, people were in uproar. They went crazy because you say Dr. Seuss. And like I just mentioned, Green Eggs and Ham, Cat in the Hat, Grinch Stoker, they all thought that they were eliminating everything Dr. Seuss has ever done because they didn't do the research. But this is where politics plays a part in it as well. The reaction to Tuesday's announcements was one of a swift derision from many conservative politicians and commentators, including Donald Trump Jr. and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who complained, watch this now, Kevin McCarthy complained on the House floor, in our nation's capital, on the House floor, that Democrats were outlawing Dr. Seuss. Let me repeat that. He stood on the House floor in our nation's capital in the Congress and said that blamed the Democrats for canceling and outlawing Dr. Seuss. He posted a YouTube video of himself the next day reading Green Eggs and Ham, which was nowhere included in the 6 titles that they're not publishing anymore. But this shows you that people take what they want to take and they run with it to the level of getting people to misunderstand what is truly going on. This is someone that was elected into political office that took the time to totally, and I'll go back again, as I always say, hijack the narrative of what was being done by Dr. Seuss's books and being done by Dr. Seuss's estate. It had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with you, had nothing to do with anybody. Dr. Seuss's estate took the time to do research and have people come in and look at these books and come to the conclusion that they may need to pull these books and stop publishing these books because of the discriminatory aspects in the book. But then you have people like Donald Trump Jr., House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. You had people on Fox News, you had people on CNN, you had people in all these different networks putting these things out here like Dr. Seuss was totally being canceled and then relating it to cancel culture. So with that being said, let me transition, because I pulled up on Facebook, just out of curiosity. I go searching for these things, just out of curiosity, to find out how people were reacting to this thought that Dr. Seuss was a victim of cancel culture. And let me tell you what cancel culture is real quick before we get into this. Cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for public figures and companies after they have done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. I don't know who calling me now. Okay, cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming. That's what cancel culture is. That's the basic definition of cancel culture. That's it. That's what it comes down to. So in my research, the phone gonna get on my nerves. In my research, hold on. My apologies, people. My apologies. I never have that happen. In my research, back to our regular schedule program. In my research, these are comments that I found online where people were posting about, I think it was Michael Baisden is where I found it. Michael Baisden had posted something about how do you feel, or what do you think about Dr. Seuss, his books not being published. And I don't even think he broke it down to it's just 6 books, but I think he had the article there where people didn't go and read it. They just went by Dr. Seuss is being canceled. And this is the comments that jumped out at me that I wrote down. And I want you to see how people react to things without knowing the true story and the in-depth story. Here we go. If the rap songs can keep going on with all the blank, 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 and girls naked or half naked, singing about the body parts, which is very offensive, these books have been around a long time. Never once did I think they were racist. But if we're going down that road, let's go down the entire road. So this person took Dr. Seuss's books that are being eliminated, not published anymore by his estate, and has commingled it into rap songs, rap lyrics, things like that. They're taking one thing and stretching it into another thing, which gets into another thing we're going to talk about a little later about whataboutism. Whataboutism. We're going to get into that. But this is where, good morning, Brian Hoodie. Appreciate the support, bro. Appreciate the support. But this is where the problems come in, because obviously this person didn't do the research. They obviously are just going by emotion because they seen Dr. Seuss was being canceled. They didn't see that Dr. Seuss's 6 books are being no longer published by his estate, who owns the right to do whatever they want to do. They didn't also read the fact that they did their research with educators to come in and read these books and see if it was a problem. But this person decided to go down the rap lyrics road to make their point. That's one. Here we go. This is also about Dr. Well, time for about 72% of the rap songs to be banned. Time for about 72% of the rap songs to be banned. Now, my question would be, where did he come up with the 72%? Where'd you get the percentage at? So you're saying 72% of the rap songs need to be eliminated because they eliminated 6 books from Dr. Seuss's catalog. Here's another one. I've heard it all now. My kids learned how to read with these books. But was it the 6 books that they're talking about? Was it the 6 books that they're talking about? It's official. We don't live in a free country. This person just went totally left, okay? We don't live in a free country. Too many people are so easily offended. My goodness. I don't make this stuff up, y'all. This is good morning, OT. Good morning. What's going on, bro? What's going on? Just because we grew up with it doesn't mean it's all good. We grew up chasing the ice cream truck, and that jingle it plays is racist as hell. Research it. I'm gonna be quiet for a minute. Let that marinate for a minute. Let that marinate. That this person says that just because we grew up with these books, which he's probably one of the ones that never read any of those 6, just like me, just like Lorraine Martinez said, that they've never heard the titles of anything. But this person said, just because we grew up with it doesn't mean it's all good. We grew up with the ice cream truck, with the ding, 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 the good human truck coming down. And then they did research and found out that the jingle for the ice cream truck has racist undertones. But it has nothing to do with them not publishing the 6 books for Dr. Seuss. The ice cream truck and Dr. Seuss are like 2 different worlds. These books have been out for how long? Now, all of a sudden, you want to pull them from the shelves. These books have been out for how long? And now you want to pull them from the shelves. See, this person didn't even get into the core of why this is going on. Now, this one totally went, which way is left? This is right. Totally went left. This one totally went left. Buckle in for this one. Biden, as in President Biden, is allowing millions of illegal aliens in our country. This is hurtful and all Americans, to all Americans, excuse me. Wait a minute, let me start over again. President Biden is allowing millions of illegal aliens in our country. This is hurtful to all Americans. It portrays Americans to be less important than all these illegal aliens. We need to cancel and stop any further illegals from coming into our country. What about it, Biden? This statement that this person wrote was on Michael Baisden's. I want to say I got it from Michael Baisden's page because, I follow a lot of people, but this person found time to write this long dissertation about illegal aliens under a post about eliminating 6 books that have racial undertones in it and blaming everything about these books on illegal aliens coming into the country and that President Biden is letting them in. Reading, let me say this for y'all, and this is for the people in the cheap seats in the back too. Reading is fundamental. However, some people fundamentally can't read or choose not to read. When I started reading this and when I started looking at this, because I was going to leave the Dr. Seuss thing alone, because when I looked at it, I was like, there's all kinds of books that you can go into. There's TV shows you can go into with this. And then you get into that conversation about cancel culture. It's a conversation I was having with some people. You look at the Little Rascals, Buckwheat. Come on. I grew up with a bunch of people that look like me and Buckwheat, but they didn't look like Buckwheat. That's what I'm saying. Stymie. You look at that. We look at the Three Stooges back in the day that we thought was so funny, but they always had the African-American or the black male on there that when he got scared, his eyes got real big. And that was something that everybody laughed about. You look at these things in the context of what they were at the time that seemed funny at the time. But as years go by and you learn more about yourself, you learn more about your history, you read more. Listen to what I said, you read more and you get a better understanding of the stereotypes that are put on certain people. And those things that we used to laugh at, we don't really laugh about anymore. So when you take the time, when an estate, like Dr. Seuss's estate, takes the time to do research to find out whether these things are offensive, rather than applaud them for what they did, we have people out here who tend to get to the point where they think because they don't agree with it that it's wrong. But it's not your estate. It's not your estate. The people who own what they own have the right to change what they want to change. And if they don't want to publish the books no more, let's applaud them that they recognize something that is an issue. Rather than trying to tear them down and get into this cancel culture and all this type stuff, applaud them for taking a stance. And maybe by them doing this with Dr. Seuss, which is a well-known writer, the books they talk about, maybe other writers, authors, producers in the industry of TVs and movies, maybe they'll start opening their eyes a little bit to see what's offensive before they put it out. And someone says that's offensive. Maybe if more people took the time on the front end to have these research panels, to look at things and interject more diversity in there, that you won't come to a point where after 117 years of this man's life, 6 of the books he wrote during that lifetime, well, it's 117 now, I can't remember when he passed away, but 117 now. But the books that he wrote during his lifetime, out of all the books he wrote, I think there were 60, but 6 of them are being pulled because of the content. And people are in an uproar. Now, the question I have is does this say more about how we look at things through a different lens because of our experiences? That's number one. Number two is when people who feel that they're being done wrong, are they truly saying they're being done wrong or feel that they're being done wrong because of what's changing or what they feel needs to stay status quo? And then the other part of it is If you didn't take the time to read the article to understand exactly why they're taking them out of circulation and why they're not publishing them anymore and what the problem is with the books and why they're pulling them, then you're not really interested in the reasoning. You're only interested in pushing back on why they're doing what they're doing. Has nothing to do with the basics of why they're doing it. You're just mad because they're doing it. That's what it comes down to. We get so caught up in what is not being allowed that we don't pay attention to the things that are going forward that are doing good for everybody. We're talking about 6 books. As I mentioned, 6 titles that if I did a survey right now of everybody that's watching and everybody that you know, I guarantee they have never heard of these titles. They have never even read these books. And to know that they're offensive was probably a shock. But then what they did after they heard about these titles, if they read the article in depth, the first thing I did, which is probably what a lot of people did, was start thinking about other books, other titles that Dr. Seuss may have written that are not being eliminated, and asking yourself what kind of undertones are they, or can it be perceived as racist undertones in those books as well? It's just natural to do that. If you take the time to read what the first part is about, then it causes your mind to think further into understanding the other aspects of what could be coming down the line. But when you don't do that, you come up with these type of comments where you go from Dr. Seuss's books to immigration to rap lyrics to anything outside the box is where people go. And that's what leads me into whataboutism. Whataboutism. You know, we get caught up in this whataboutisms because when someone brings something up to us and we don't have a retort, a reply, or a good reasoning, or the knowledge, as I mentioned last week when we talk about knowledge, or the knowledge to respond articulately, we're using the whataboutism. Because someone will say, well, Colin Kaepernick had a right to kneel, which is what everybody said. And then they'll flip it and they'll say, yeah, but what about the people burning the flag? You can do that legally, but you shouldn't be kneeling because of the national anthem. Wait, whoa. Wait a minute. Colin Kaepernick ain't saying nothing about burning no flag. How did the burning of the flag get involved with kneeling on the national anthem? That's the narrative that changes. That's the parts that people play in this. And we're all, and I'm just going to put it out there, we're all guilty of this to a certain extent. And not to the point that we don't know what we're talking about, but we always resort to something to counteract what something is. It's not done consciously in most cases. Some people do it consciously. Sometimes we do it unconsciously. And that's where I get into this, looking at these things about Dr. Seuss when they get into the rap lyrics. Okay, we fought about these rap lyrics for a long time. Long time. You had rappers back in the day, NWA with F the Police. You had Ice-T with Cop Killer. And everything was going towards the police, and a lot of people had a problem with that. But what they didn't understand and what they didn't really look at is the reason why these people, these rappers, were talking about the police in this manner. But what they have to do is people speak about their experiences. So if you've had bad run-ins with the police officers or police officers on a consistent basis, then you're probably one of those people to say F the police. But if you're a policeman or someone, a policeman, or you know someone who is an officer of the law, you probably were offended by the F the police. Understandable. But you can't minimize what someone else's experiences are to fit your narrative. It's just like Black Lives Matter. When they brought up the Black Lives Matter movement, everything was going on. And a lot of people don't reckon it all the way back to Mike Brown in St. Louis, outside of St. Louis, rather, Ferguson, Missouri. But when the Black Lives Matter movement started, the first retort was all lives matter. Then when a policeman officer got killed, blue lives matter. All these different narratives come into play because it's a whataboutism. Black lives matter. Well, nobody else matters. That's not what we said. That's not what was being said. But we get into this whataboutism because people don't want to get to the root cause of what's really going on. They don't want to get to the root cause of why these things are happening. No one wants to dig deep. And that's why I said with Dr. Seuss's estate, you have to give them applause for what they did. They took the time after all these years to relook at things from a different perspective. This is not 117 years ago where they were starting to write these books and symbolisms of, as they said, they had, African Americans in one of these books with, well, let me go here. Not the books. I'm going to digress for a minute because I had this conversation with somebody the other day. We all grew up watching TV. It was only like 3 or 4 channels back in the day. But one of the favorite shows that a lot of us used to watch was Tarzan. Let's just be honest. We watched Tarzan. We watched Tarzan swing through the jungle with what was the chimp's name? I can't remember, but you know who I'm talking about. Tarzan swang through the jungle and everything. And then there was all kind of African natives walking around with grass skirts and bones in their nose and everything like that. And the image that they portrayed through Hollywood was what we all thought was real in Africa. Because the image that was being portrayed, we accepted and we embraced it because the hero was Tarzan. But we overlooked the fact of how we were symbolized, the Africans were symbolized in that show because we were concentrating on what was Tarzan going to do next. And I jokingly said to the person when I was talking, I said, well, we seen Tarzan swinging through trees and, fighting the Africans and, everything. And they were the natural born people of that country, but Tarzan could speak to the animals and they couldn't. Now I digressed a little bit, but you get the point. It's the symbolisms of those things that we see now differently. At the time, we were looking at Tarzan as kind of a superhero, like a Superman or something in that aspect, while minimizing, as they said in one of his books, where the Oompa Loompas, not in the book, but in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Oompa Loompas were African pygmies at one time. So when they changed that narrative in that, shouldn't they have changed the way that the Africans were being portrayed in Tarzan? Just something to think about. Cheetah. Thank you, bro. Somebody was watching Tarzan. Cheetah. Because and I laugh about it, but when you start sitting back and you think about it, and you start thinking about the things we grew up watching, things we grew up reading, things we grew up listening to music-wise or anything like that. Because here's the thing. When I watched this, when I was looking at this and I was pulling these comments and they started going on the rap thing. Everybody goes to rap when they talk about things that need to be canceled with this cancel culture. They think about rap lyrics. They talk about WAP with Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. They always bring that up about how women are being sexualized and things like that. But they've never, and then at one time they talked about Luke, 2 Live Crew and all them, how they were objectifying women and different things like that. I'm cool with that. That's what we do. That's what happens. Rap lyrics, the N-word. Let's go there. I used to listen to a lot of rap. One of my favorite rappers, Tupac. I'm not gonna lie. One of my favorite rappers is Tupac. At one time when Tupac had his double album, All Eyes on Me, I knew every word on that album from beginning to end on both CDs. Now when I hear it, I cringe. Because I'm not one that uses the N-word, but I was comfortable using it in the lyrics that I was listening to at the time. So I didn't think in my psyche that it was a problem for me using the N-word in conjunction with the songs I was singing. But at this point in my life, if the songs come on, I may still listen, but I skip over the N-word because that's where I'm at in my life. But then I have to ask myself, and we should all ask ourselves, when we see a young white male rapping the lyrics to a song and he's doing the N-word and things like that, and the B word and the H word and all those different words that come in there, do we get offended that he's saying it, or do we get offended of who's saying it compared to the words that are in the song? How do we balance that? Because that's when the cancel culture comes in, where you can't say that. But it's in a song that we all love. But you can't say that. These are things that have been, since I've seen this Dr. Seuss thing, have been kind of festering. And I know it's not something that we're all going to solve overnight. But I think we all need to be cognizant of these things going on around us, in the aspect that it's Dr. Seuss today. They found these things about six of Dr. Seuss's books. Fine. They decided in his estate that they're going to not publish them anymore. But when someone who owns the rights to something decides not to publish them anymore, that's their right. Why are people in such an uproar? Because they decided to do this, not just for their benefit, but for the benefit of the masses, as I always say. But people are mad. People are mad. Whataboutism? The technique or practice of responding to an accusation or difficult question by making a counter accusation or raising a different issue. We see it all the time. Politicians do it all the time. Mainstream media does it all the time. I try my best not to, and I know I get caught up in those things too. We all do. But what do you do when you've noticed and you recognize it? Do you change? Do you alter it? Do you try to get out of that whataboutism and speak facts rather than doing a comparison for apples and oranges? Just doesn't make sense. But we get caught up in the conversation. I don't get it, y'all. I don't get it. But let's move on to this mind, body, and soul segment. Mind, body, and soul. 2021, y'all. This is the year. 2021 is about self-care. It's talking about self-care and taking it one day at a time. We're working on ourselves. But as far as working on ourselves, we also have to work on how we deal with others around us. And it goes into what we were talking about today, these topics about, it all geared around Dr. Seuss and the optics of what some people want to see and what they don't think you should see and all those type things. But today on the Mind, Body, and Soul segment, this is something that ties into that. And I think it's something that we all need to really look at within ourselves. We are all so desperate to be understood, we forget to be understanding. We are all so desperate to be understood that we forget to be understanding. When you think about conversations that you have, when you're talking to people and you're trying to get your point across, you want to be understood. You want people to get your point. How many times have you tried to get your point across and totally disregarded the point that someone else is trying to make? This is what has happened with some of the narratives that have come out over the last 8 to 10 years, leading up to this Dr. Seuss thing. Our understanding and what we want people to know about us, we put in the forefront. But we never put in the forefront the understanding of what someone else's reasonings are, what the reasons they say and the reasons they act the way they act. When we get into the parts about in Black History Month, when we talk about the racism and the slavery and different things like that, when we speak on these things, we just want people to understand and to understand exactly what effects it has on us as a people, not individually, but as a mass of people. And then when you ask for that understanding, for people to understand, you may not know my journey. You may not know my trials and tribulations, but try to have some understanding that throughout my trials and tribulations and the things that have happened to me, I'm not saying that everything that has happened to me is because of my skin tone and how I look. But understand that it plays a factor in a lot of things that go on with me. This happens with women. It happens with men. It happens with us all. If you really think about it, when you're a kid and you really don't understand who you are and you're being called names and people are treating you a different way and you're just trying to be, you're more misunderstood than you're understood, is because nobody's taking the time to understand who you are. They're going to put labels on you to get you to a point where they want you to be who they say you are. Understanding, compassion, empathy All these things play a toll in that. Because one thing that we know, when we talk about cancel culture and whataboutisms and the optics of things that go on in our lives, we all see things through a different lens because all of our experiences are different. But at the end of the day, we all just want to be understood, to know, and the understanding from others is that my experiences have made me who I am. So don't minimize me because your experiences are different. Embrace our differences, because what's different about you and what's different about me makes us the same if we have understanding. But we have to get to a point where we understand that people want to be understood, and your understanding is not always the priority in any conversation, in any situation. Take the time to understand what other people's trials, tribulations, their struggles are, because most of the time when we know people are struggling and going through things, we brush it off as that's their issue. But if you take the time to understand that they may be going through something because of something else, and take the time to sit down and talk to a person, or even your employees. I mean, that's one of the big things about a job when you're a supervisor or a manager, understanding and knowing your employees, to know exactly when there's an issue with your employees and why the work is not being done in the manner it was done before. But we tend to overlook those things because all we look at is we have a bad employee. Sometimes taking the time to get to know and understand why people do what they do, it eliminates a lot. We are all so desperate to be understood that we forget to be understanding. Appreciate the support, big brother. Understanding. That's what we need. That's what we need. Let's wrap this thing up. Appreciate everybody tuning in today. As I mentioned, I'm trying to gear away from the politics. There's going to be some injected here and there because a lot of things are going on we need to know about. When I talk about the elections coming up, this is not something we need to be worried about come election season. These are things that are going on now that they're preparing for election season. If you ever noticed, and I'm going to put this out here, if you've ever noticed, when it comes to things that are going to be the benefit of the masses, it's not something that they start integrating and trying to manipulate the day of. It's a long process that they do, and they do it so quietly that nobody realizes what's being done until you get to the point of where those decisions impact what you're trying to do. In Georgia, Louisiana, I think Mississippi, Texas, there's a lot of states that are changing these rules right now. Right now. A lot of places are changing these rules right now. What are we going to do moving forward from this? Because here's the thing. As much as we say your vote matters, and people will say, nah, it don't matter because of the Electoral College, you have to ask yourself, if they're taking this much effort to affect my vote, or the vote of a mass of people, demographics wise, it has to be more important than they're making it seem. So we need to take it to make it seem and become more important to us, not just an action, but it has to be an ongoing process of what we're doing as far as making sure that everyone who has the right to vote gets to vote. And these hindrances that they're putting in the way, that we need to do whatever we can to stop them. And I'll bring up this one example. Stacey Abrams, all the work she did in Georgia over this last election, from the time she lost when she was running for governor, well, it was stolen from her, let's just be real. But from the time she lost up until the day of the election when Joe Biden was inaugurated, Stacey Abrams had her feet on the ground, and as they say, her nose to the grindstone, and did everything in her power to make sure the people who had a right to vote got out there and voted. We all need to have that same energy when it comes to just affecting those around us and making sure that we're doing and making sure that they have the right to go and make their voices heard at the polls, no matter what the distractions are that they're putting in the way. Because I'm going to tell you, this is 2021. The next election is in 2022. They're already laying the groundwork to eliminate a mass of people. What are we going to do with the things they put out there? Are we going to say, well, they took this away, so I'm not going to go? Or are we going to find ways around what they did to make our voices be heard? We got work to do, y'all. We got work to do. Appreciate everybody tuning in. rwcoolness.com. That's the website. Go there, check out everything. Spreaker.com, Apple iTunes, download the audio. And I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hey, and if I haven't told y'all, man, I appreciate y'all. I know sometimes we don't give people their flowers while they're here. I want to let everybody know that tunes in weekly, whether you tune in weekly, whether you tune in the first time, or whether you listen offline or anything like that. I appreciate it. I appreciate it because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put the information out there. What you do with it is up to you. As the preacher says, if I can get one, if I can get one, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I always say, I'm not trying to change your mind, but I'm trying to get you to think differently. I'm trying to get you to understand that sometimes reading the top phrase of an article will not give you what the article truly says. You need to read in depth what that article is saying. And we've seen it with these quotes that I read, or these comments that I made today, that people see what they want to see and they react to what they think is the truth, rather than finding the truth out for themselves. And I'm just going to leave it at that. As I always say before I sign off, love yourself, love one another, keep your head up, and most definitely keep your faith in God. And the last thing, if you're scheduled to get your vaccine, go get your vaccine, get your vaccine so we can get back to some sense of normalcy. If you're living in Texas or Mississippi, wear your mask. If you're living in Texas or Mississippi, wear your mask. I'm just saying, wear your mask. It ain't that safe out there yet. Wear your mask. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. And I'll holler at y'all next week. Peace.